Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to our online service at Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I invite you to follow along in the order of service. It's posted there in the chat. Whoever you are and wherever you come from, for this hour, we here are one gathered congregation and all are welcome. My name is Lisa Johnson. I am co-president of our Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship's Board of Directors. And during this very difficult time we're living through, I am so grateful for this beloved community, which gives me strength and hope. We will get through this time we are in, and we'll do it together with love. Our worship leader this morning is Reverend Jessica Starr-Rockers. And I'd like to welcome any visitors. We're glad you're here. Please introduce yourself in the chat room. We welcome more interaction with all during our after the service coffee hour. The link for our coffee hour will go into the chat, or not be there now. And you will need to use the top secret password, coffee with a capital C, to be admitted to the coffee hour. The announcements are available on our webpage, www.kuuf.org, and our weekly email newsletter, The Candle. We'd like to start today by acknowledging that the land on which we all live is the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish, the S'Klallam, and the Skokomish people. They have lived in harmony with the lands and the waterways along the Washington Central Salish Sea for thousands of years. These tribes still live here and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Now, please join Alina Hemingway, Mike Menifee, and Brian Kenny singing and playing hymn number 1014, Standing on the Side of Love. Thank you. Thank you, Alina, Brian, and Mike. We are so blessed in our musicians. And I neglected to say earlier that today, after the service, there will be a new to UU workshop via Zoom, and there is the link to that in the chat. Now, please join me in lighting our chalice. If you have your own chalice or candle, please light it as we say these words by Reverend Scott Taylor. In the soft light of this flame, may our lives shimmer anew. May we notice new possibility in those relationships that seem lost. May the turning of the year give birth to a dream. May the emerging light pull a new story into view. May what is give way to what might be. May we believe again in the world we imagine. Now, please join in singing our opening hymn, number 1015, I Know I Can, by Alina Menifee, Brian Kenny, and Mike Menifee.
Still I see that destination clear.
Yes, it's clear.
Those troubles may wait me at every turn, but I know, yes I know I can go on. So brother, take my hand. Sisters, help me sing my song. For I know hope awaits me at every turn. And I know, yes I know we will go on.
Please join me in our spoken affirmation. The words are there on your screen. We gather as a caring community seeking life's deeper meanings. We value diversity and affirm the worth of all living things. We strive to speak truth in love, to act for justice, to grow in spirit, and to care for the earth. We celebrate with open hearts and minds the creative power that sustains and transforms us. Now it is time for our morning offering. If you would like to donate electronically, please click on the paypal.me link there on the chat. Then you may email admin@kuuf.org to let us know if your donation is for the KUUF General Fund, the Minister's Discretionary Fund, which helps members in need, or our monthly charitable giving recipient for the month of January, Peninsula Community Health Services. You may also send a check to the address there on the screen. Please write in the memo line to which of the funds you wish the money to go. If this is your first time at KUUF, there is no need to donate. You are our guest. So let there be an offering to strengthen and sustain our community, which is sacred to so many of us.
Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love.
Good morning, everyone. I am Reverend Jessica, and it is time for our children's story. So I invite the young and the young at heart to sit a little bit closer to the screen. And I'm going to talk about something really powerful today. I'm going to talk about hope. And first, I have a question. Have you ever hoped for something? Oh, and I want to say, I just saw that it looks like Tanisha has turned on subtitles. So if you need some help listening to the service and you want that extra assistance, you can click on live transcript, which should be below your video, and you can turn on the captions. And it should say show subtitle, and you should be able to follow along. So I hope that works for you. Give it a try. We're trying this out. And especially for those folks who've had some audio issues this morning, this might help. So give that a try. Oh, good. Seems to be automatic. Great. Okay, so let's continue with our children's story. Have you ever hoped for something? I know that a lot of people hoped for this live transcript to have the subtitles, and did the thing that you hoped for happen? Well, I think that hope is kind of like this acorn. This isn't a real acorn, of course. This is a little stuffed acorn, but it's big enough for you to see that it looks kind of like an acorn. So I'm going to ask you, Liam, what do you think that this acorn hopes to be someday?
Probably an oak tree.
An oak tree. So here's why acorns remind me of hope. Now, if I just dropped this acorn on the floor and walked away, would it have any hope of becoming an oak tree?
No.
No. So what does it need?
It needs soil, water, air, and sunshine.
Soil, water, air, and sunshine. That's a lot of stuff. Well, like acorns, our hope needs help. Just hope can't do it alone. First, we start with our imaginations. We imagine that thing we're hoping for. So, why don't we take a moment to close our eyes and imagine something that we hope for. Can you see it? Really picture it. And ask yourself, you ask yourself some questions. While you're picturing it in your mind, what does it sound like, this thing that you hope for? Maybe you can hear it. What does it taste like? What would it smell like? And what would it feel like in our hearts and our spirits and in our bodies? You can really imagine. Well, and here's the best thing. You don't have to keep it a secret. It's not like a birthday wish. You can tell everybody what it is that you hope for, and you should tell everybody. And if you want to, right now, you could put it in the chat and tell everybody what it is that you hope for. Because with hope, you really should tell as many people as you can. Definitely your family, and definitely your minister and your community, because we all like to work together. And a lot of times we share the same big hopes, and we want to make our big hopes happen. And a hope that you want to happen is like this acorn. It needs help. It needs hard work and care and action, and sometimes even a little bit of luck. In the same way that a small acorn becomes a huge, massive oak tree, a tiny, precious hope can only come to life when it has everything that it requires, and when everyone works together and takes action to make it come true. And I see lots of wonderful hopes coming in. So I have one last important question. Could you ever have an oak tree without first having an acorn?
I mean, it's a bit like the chicken and the egg, so no.
No. The same way, every great thing anyone's ever done began with hope, with someone's imagination of what could be, and then with the help of their community, they took action to help it grow to life. The same way, that's the power of imagination and hope. You need that first. So, as we think about the acorn that we are planting these days, the things we are imagining and hoping and working into being, let us sing together. Singing together is an important part of a community coming together and making something happen. And even though I can't hear you singing, we can really feel it. So make sure you sing good and loud. And no matter what happens, we're still singing together and letting our little lights shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go,
it shine.
Thank you, everybody, for singing along, for putting your hopes in our chat today. William was here, even though I don't know if you could see him. He was here. I hope you could hear him. Thank you both. And now is the time for our joys and sorrows. Though we are physically distanced from one another, our hearts and our spirits remain connected. When shared together, our joys are amplified and our sorrows lessened. If you have a personal joy or sorrow to share, I invite you to put that in the chat this morning. We have a joy that Georgians elected a black man and a Jewish man to the Senate. We had a lot of joy on Wednesday for sure. From Sharon, joy that Brooke and I got to see our longtime friend who is now on hospice. We're sharing that joy with you. Phoenix says, celebrating Dad's 90th birthday. Happy birthday to your dad. Maya, joy that my mom's birthday is on the 17th. Vicki sharing a joy that I may return to my job with Army sooner than expected. We're sharing that joy with you, Vicki. Jackie has a joy that a dear relative has survived COVID and has been released from the hospital. How wonderful. Owie, joy for my vaccine and for recovery from the side effects. We're certainly sharing in that joy. Bonner, so saddened and angered by the events in our nation's capital this past Wednesday. So grateful that Reverend Jessica chose to have the Vespers theme that evening be a peace vigil. Oh, we're sharing in those feelings with you, Bonner. From Jennifer, sorrow that 3 family members have COVID and 2 are in the hospital. We're sending our hearts, our prayers out to your family, Jennifer. Liz is joyful to return to in-person school tomorrow to see her kiddos, but is also very concerned about her health and that of her students, their families, her colleagues, and their families. Holding you all in our heart. Jill has a sorrow that sister-in-law can't get treatment for COVID. Certainly sharing in that sorrow with you. Yeah. We are breathing today into all that we carry into our service today. And I want to take a moment right now just to say a prayer together, just to invite us all into a spirit of prayer. We ask the spirit of life and the spirit of love to shine its light of healing on our nation, to shine its light of healing to all those who are continually terrorized, to shine its light of strength on all of us right now as we move through these uncertain times. May we all feel that spirit of life and love in the midst of all of this violence and hate. May we share in that light of healing. We have Miles, who is happy to have family. That's wonderful, Miles. Bonner is glad that he received the payment check from the government, sharing that joy with you. Aaron has a sorrow for ongoing white supremacy in our country and its platform this week, supported by elected leaders and law enforcement at the Capitol. We share in that sorrow with you, Aaron. And for all of those whose sorrow is too tender to share, whose joy remains resting in their heart, may you feel the spirit of peace and love and joy with you today. And may it be with all of us now. Amen, and blessed be.
In the aftermath, I'm sure I'll feel like a tourist, passing through my own life. I'll add up my subtractions, stand in the great divide, multiplying the things I have left. In the aftermath of all this, I'll sing with you, in a choir stand, on street corners, and at my favorite karaoke night, I'll stroll aimlessly around the mall, even though I hated them all. We'll brush shoulders and walk down the same aisles. I'll make you a meal. I'll never leave the party early without a really good excuse, and we'll dance. Bump and grind, spin and dip. I'll give you a spoonful of my ice cream. I'll let you try my beer, a forkful of my favorite dessert. We'll pass homemade dishes around a full potluck dinner table. We'll have hugs so close and tight the world will burst into giggles. I'll hold my friends' children, kiss the foreheads of my nieces and nephews. I'll bump your hand as we walk down the sidewalk. We'll hold hands without guilt. You won't have to look for the smile in my eyes. Above my masks, we'll get a window seat. As we watch friends and lovers gather on lawns and in courtyards, I'll remember the things that brought me strength, the ways I gave and was given to, how I learned to pause and breathe in the day, how I made a feast of my feelings and served it up, poem after poem, seeing myself both seed and tree. The world will see me in full color, Black and American. A resilient ancestry will hold our leaders and officers accountable. We won't be so well adjusted to injustice, and we will allow suffering to speak. We'll get to work and heal together. In the aftermath, I'll reach into my pocket for a letter from my past self that reads, I will be here for you. Yes, always and forever. Even when the world stops, the cards have all folded, and you are in between the lines.
Hallelujah, sing stars that gave us birth. Hallelujah, resounds our home, the earth. Hallelujah, shall echo across the skies. Alleluia, when peace has shown us wise.
Well, on Wednesday of this week in the United States, two things happened. First, Georgia, a state represented in the House by civil rights leader John Lewis until his death last year, held a special election. And with the help of an enormous coalition of justice seekers and voting rights activists led by Stacey Abrams and other Black women, John Lewis's pastor, Reverend Raphael Warnock, and John Lewis's former intern, John Ossoff, were elected to represent Georgia in the US Senate. Reverend Warnock is the first Black man in history to hold a Senate seat in Georgia. I woke up to this news and began this sermon. The title, which I had chosen last year in early December, The Impossible Will Take a While, felt right on. Seemed to me the impossible had happened. And though it had taken a while, in this case for Georgia over hundreds of years, it did happen. The mountaintop that many of our ancestors could never have envisioned had been summited. And I felt blessed to be alive to witness to it. The swift and frightening white backlash to this was the second thing that happened. That morning, as Congress gathered to confirm the election results of this past November, a violent mob of white supremacists fomented by our sitting US president stormed the Capitol building in DC. They carried guns, bombs, and other weapons, intent on causing harm and taking hostages. They vandalized, desecrated, and stole. Congress members in gas masks cowered in their chambers and their offices, while people carrying Confederate flags and wearing T-shirts with anti-Semitic hate symbols carried out a full-blown insurrection, something that hasn't happened on US soil since the Civil War. Astoundingly, or maybe not, the police only made 13 arrests. If you are like me, you are still having trouble processing all of this, not just in our minds, but in our hearts and our bodies. Unitarian Universalism has been studying white supremacy for a long time, increasingly over the last 8 years or so. We, as a faith movement, have begun the work of identifying white supremacy in ourselves and in our institutions, the way this system of oppression is embedded inside everything, is part of every other organizing system in this country, from housing to voting to education to the courts to policing. From Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown to George Floyd, all the lives lost. Though through all of this, we have been witnessing and demonstrating Black people trying to educate and endure, trying to be heard and understood, white people trying to show up and listen and learn. And yet still, many of us white people, myself included, we keep being shocked. After all I have attempted to learn and unlearn about racism, I was still shocked when George Floyd was killed so brutally, when I learned Breonna Taylor was shot in her bed and no one was charged with the crime. I was shocked when, during the presidential debates, our current president told white supremacist fascist militia, the Proud Boys, to stand back and stand by. And somehow I was shocked this week again when the Proud Boys were let into the Senate chambers by some of the very DC police who were supposed to be protecting and serving the democratic process that was taking place. We might wonder why these police officers allowed a vicious mob in. But in the days since, the news has reported that the mob was made up not just of civilian militia, but of off-duty and retired police officers as well, 2 of whom traveled all the way from Seattle PD. In her book, White Rage by Carol Anderson, she writes, "The trigger for white rage, inevitably, is Black advancement. It is not the mere presence of Black people that is the problem. Rather, it is Blackness with ambition, with drive, with purpose, with aspirations, and with demands for full and equal citizenship. It is Blackness that refuses to give up." So let's talk about a refusal to give up. In Georgia, specifically, for many of us who live thousands of miles from Georgia, the special election merely represented the opportunity to flip the Senate from Republican to Democrat. But for Georgia, the outcome of the Wednesday election was about more than just political control. The voter suppression that has occurred in that state goes back to the Reformation, when the Ku Klux Klan used violence to intimidate Black voters and reestablish white supremacy. Reverend William Barber from the Poor People's Campaign was quoted recently in the Chicago Sun-Times as saying, "In Georgia, Jim Crow did not retire. He went to law school and launched a second career. Meet James Crow, Esquire." Most recently, over 200,000 Georgians, mostly Black, young, and low income, were wrongly purged from the voter rolls without any idea it had happened. Stacey Abrams ran for governor of Georgia in 2018, and this voter suppression, aided by her opponent Brian Kemp, who was acting Secretary of State at the time, contributed to her losing the race. So she created an organization called Fair Fight, and she partnered with other Black-led organizations in Georgia to fight against voter suppression and disenfranchisement. Stacey Abrams, Latasha Brown, Erin Haynes, and Keisha Lance Bottoms. These are the Black women in Georgia who have been organizing for voting rights for a long time, part of a rich tradition in the state. A recent article in the Washington Post told the story of this legacy. The 1881 laundry workers' labor strike, led by the primarily Black Washing Society. The 1897 campaign in Georgia against mass incarceration, led by Selena Sloan Butler, who exposed the state's inhumane chain gang system. And more recently, in 1968, after the Voting Rights Act, Dorothy Lee Bolden of the National Domestic Workers Union registered 13,000 domestic workers to vote. And then there's John Lewis, the Georgia House rep who famously marched with Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma and dedicated his life to fight for equal rights. Few attended the Vespers service on Wednesday night when many of us gathered as we tried to come to grips with what had just happened that day. I read John Lewis's letter, the one he wrote just before he died, which was published on the day of his death last year in the New York Times. In it, he says, "You must also study and learn the lessons of history, because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out so long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence, is the more excellent way." Wednesday, when we witnessed the backlash to progress of hate groups taking over the Capitol, of hate literally pushing back against morality and decency and love and justice, the way that the violent white insurrectionists were treated so much more humanely than peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters, how our democratic process was so abruptly cut off by the man who 4 years ago pledged on a sacred text to uphold it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It was a painful, scary, and sorrowful thing to witness. And though I simply refuse to be shocked anymore by the audacity of white supremacy in our systems and government, I will admit that on Wednesday, I was deeply disturbed. But Wednesday was also John Lewis's day, and Stacey Abrams, Latasha Brown, Erin Haynes, and Keisha Lance Bottoms, Selena Sloan Butler, Dorothy Lee Bolden. The list goes on, many of whose names we know, and countless millions truly that we don't. You and I, all of us gathered here, are merely part of this movement, part of the sea change, part of the sea. We are called upon in this moment to keep the wave of justice moving forward, to keep imagining, to keep holding the vision, to plant acorns whose trees we will never see, to know that another mountaintop exists, even though today we may struggle to envision what it looks like. What seemed impossible 400, 100, even 50 years ago, we are witnessing come to pass. And the backlash, or the white lash, as someone said recently, is scary. Violence and mob rule is terrifying, but its function is to intimidate. Its function is to disturb. Its function is to terrorize. And our faith calls us to resist this terror and to be undisturbed from building the beloved community. And the beloved community, even though we often use it to describe ourselves because we are so beloved to one another, the term, the beloved community, comes from Martin Luther King Jr. And in his description, it is not necessarily a place. It lives in our hopes. It lives in our dreams and our imaginations. It lives in our ideals, our covenants to one another, our values, and our behaviors that come from those values. So in this way, the beloved community is not a place or a thing. It is a way to orient our minds and our hearts and our souls. It is the actions that we take that move all of us, ourselves, our families, our communities, our nation, toward greater love and justice for everyone. What does it mean to hold this vision, to build the beloved community that we seek? Carol Anderson writes, full voting rights for American citizens, funding and additional resources for quality schools, and policing and court systems in which racial bias is not sanctioned by law. All of these are well within our grasp. Visionaries, activists, judges, and politicians before us saw what America could be and fought hard for that kind of nation. This is the moment now when all of us, Black, white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, must step out of the shadow of white rage, deny its power, understand its unseemly goals, and refuse to be seduced by its buzzwords, dog whistles, and sophistry. This is when we choose a different future. Together in this community, we affirm and promote 7 principles that we believe are critical as a guide for us as we try to find our way forward, a guide to keep us focused and undisturbed from our task. And I'm going to read them to you today because I think now more than ever, as we resist hate and build the vision of what can be, we need to remember our principles and imagine how we can bring them into our everyday lives. 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. What does that mean in our daily life? 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We are called to live these ideals every day in all we do. 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. This is our call, always toward greater love and spiritual integrity. 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And this isn't just about individual searching, this applies to the entire beloved community. 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. We are called to follow our conscience and to listen. 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. How are we connecting to movements around the globe who seek what we seek? And 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. All of this, all of life, is interconnected and sacred. Though they were written in 1984, the 7 principles came out of one of our founding documents. And because they are viewed as a living prophetic text, in recent years they have been re-examined. And in fact, an 8th principle has been proposed, which Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism has encouraged each congregation to adopt. So here's the 8th principle. Journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. As we imagine and envision the world that we are seeking, a world of love and justice, a world that values all life as inherently worthy, a world that honors the interdependent web of existence, that knows the liberation of those on the margins is the liberation of the whole. As we continue together to resist hate and fascism and the big lie of white supremacy, let us remember, we do not journey alone. Not only are we together, we are surrounded by what the biblical book of Hebrew calls the vast cloud of witnesses. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off every encumbrance and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with endurance the race set out for us. Let us refuse to be intimidated or disturbed or terrorized, but instead let us recognize the progress that is being made. The journey is long, the struggle is real, but it is one where we have witnessed the arc of the universe bending toward justice. And that is the story that should live in our imaginations as we go about the work we are called to do. Well, now is the time in our service where we set our intentions. I invite you to share a word or a phrase that is on your heart that will guide your heart and your mind this week as you seek to find balance and groundedness in your spirit. And if you feel called to, put your answer in the chat and I will read them aloud. Model peace, hope, courage, forgiveness, hope, compassion, joy, stamina, and gratitude. Push for impeachment. Give support to my wife. Nonviolence, no enemy in my heart. Stay the course. Disturb me, leave apathy. Love. Loving the other. Healing. Listen to them. Let perfect love cast out fear. Call Jessica to settle ministry. Love over hate. Love over hate. I appreciate the love. Thank you so much. Persistence. And a big heart. Endure. May we all endure with love this week. Thank you all for sharing your words of intention as they rest on all of our hearts. And now for our closing hymn, There is More Love Somewhere.
I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere. Somewhere.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Please join us after this for coffee hour. The link will appear in the chat and you can click on the link and it'll take you right to coffee hour. The password is coffee with a capital C. And the question for our small groups during coffee hour is, what is the work that you are called to do to dismantle white supremacy? We also have a new to UU class today after the service. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or new to KUUF, we invite you to join us for this conversation. A little UU history, a little getting to know you. I'll be there. I look forward to connecting with you. And the link for that is also in the chat. And now let us extinguish our chalices with these closing words from the Reverend Bill Sinkford. Oh, Spirit of life and love, dear God of all nations, there is much work to do. We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Help us hold fast to our vision of what can be. May we see the hope in our history and find the courage and the voice to work for that constant rebirth of freedom and justice. That is our dream. Amen. Ashe. May it be so. you.